And this is why Jalen is so good.
Then what do you think of the contracts?
No, he really didn't. He said,
It was February 2016, and Stephen Curry was in the middle of making history. Golden State was on pace for what would become a 73-win season, the greatest regular season record in NBA history. And Curry himself was piling up three-pointers at a rate no one had ever seen before. 402 in a single season, the kind of number that made every analyst on television reach for the nearest superlative. So when ESPN Radio's Mike and Mike called Oscar Robertson for his thoughts on the Warriors and on Curry's perimeter dominance, everyone assumed the 77-year-old Hall of Famer would simply tip his hat to the game's evolution. That is not what happened. I just don't think coaches today in basketball understand the game of basketball, Robertson said. They don't know anything about defenses. They don't know what people are doing on the court. They talk about analytical basketball and stuff like that. He went further. He questioned why defenses weren't pressing Curry further out from the basket. Why teams were still picking up their man at the foul line when Robertson's generation had been hounded from the moment an opponent touched an inbound pass. In basketball today, he said, it's almost like if you can dunk or make a three-point shot, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. The internet had opinions. Headlines ran with Oscar Robertson criticizing Stephen Curry. Talk shows debated whether the Big O had officially become the cranky legend who couldn't let the old game go. But here's the part that most of those headlines missed entirely. Because this same man, the one tearing apart modern coaching and passive defensive schemes, had already in a separate interview called LeBron James a player unlike anyone he had ever seen in his life. And in 1 year's time, he would write his own column defending Russell Westbrook's MVP credentials with the kind of passion most people reserve for their own championship runs. So which one was it? Was Oscar Robertson the old guard dismissing modern basketball, or was he something far more complicated and far more interesting than that? To understand what Robertson actually meant when he sat down for that 2016 interview, you have to go back to what Robertson actually was. Oscar Robertson grew up in Indianapolis, his family having moved north from Charlotte, Tennessee, as part of the Great Migration. He attended Crispus Attucks High School and led what would become the first all-black team to win the Indiana State Championship. He went to the University of Cincinnati, became a three-time All-American, won a gold medal at the 1960 Rome Olympics, and then entered the NBA as the most complete guard the league had ever produced. By his second season, 1961-62, he did something no player had done before and that almost no player has done since. He averaged a triple-double for the entire year. 30 points, 12.5 rebounds, 11.5 assists every single night across a full season. He would go on to record 181 career triple-doubles, win the 1964 MVP, make 12 All-Star teams, and finally earn his only championship ring in 1971 with the Milwaukee Bucks alongside a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was also a union man. Robertson led the NBA Players Association's antitrust lawsuit against the league that eventually cracked open the path to free agency. The settlement became known officially as the Oscar Robertson Rule. So when this particular person looked at the modern NBA and had something to say, you might want to listen closely, because Robertson was not watching basketball from a distance. He was watching it the way someone watches a game they spent their entire life inside. And what he saw in February 2016, during Golden State's historic chase, was a defensive culture he found almost unrecognizable. His argument was specific. He was not saying Stephen Curry was a bad player. He was saying that the coaching responses to Curry made no sense to him. If I've got a guy who's great shooting the ball outside, Robertson said, don't you want to extend your defense out a little bit? In his playing days, the rules of engagement were different. If an opponent hit a shot from the perimeter, the defender covered him further out going forward. Full court, three-quarter court, half-court pressure. You made the shooter earn every look. But in the 2015-16 season, Robertson was watching defenses set up at the foul line, while Curry gathered himself behind the arc, and the whole arrangement struck him as a kind of institutional negligence. When I played years ago, he said, if you shot a shot outside and hit it, the next time I'm going to be up on top of you. I'm going to pressure you with three-quarters, half-court defense. But now they don't do that. These coaches do not understand the game of basketball as far as I'm concerned. He was equally blunt about offensive design. They run one play, he said. Well, maybe two plays. They've got a high pick with the center, then the shooters run baseline trying to get open with blocks from the forwards. I mean, that's it. You don't see hardly any reverse plays at all. No double screens, no weak side. Robertson had played in an era of multiple screening actions, misdirection, and patience basketball that rewarded precision over athleticism and punished teams that didn't respect the craft of scheme. What he was watching on those Warriors highlight reels felt like an oversimplification of the sport he had given his entire body to. Some of that criticism landed squarely. Some of it, media analysts argued at the time, oversimplified what Golden State was actually running. But the broader point Robertson was making was never really about the Warriors' playbook. It was about a league culture he believed had started to mistake explosion for excellence, started confusing individual highlight plays with actual defensive homework. But here's the thing. Robertson was not confused about the players themselves. 5 years before that Mike and Mike interview, in October 2010, Robertson had spoken to ESPN's Mark Schwartz about LeBron James. Charles Barkley had been positioning Michael Jordan as the definitive greatest of all time in a way that seemed to push back on LeBron's growing claim to that conversation. Robertson had no patience for it. LeBron is in a class by himself, he said. Not a footnote, not a qualifier, a class by himself. And then in July 2016, barely 5 months after the coaching comments that had set the internet on fire, Robertson wrote a column for Anscape about LeBron's performance in the NBA Finals, the series where Cleveland came back from 3-1 against those same Golden State Warriors. Robertson praised LeBron's footwork, his shot selection, his defensive effort, his basketball IQ, and then he went further than any of that. No one has ever before seen a player quite like LeBron, Robertson wrote. He's a 5-tool player, fundamentally sound, and able to do practically anything on the court. As the NBA continues to evolve, I think he is the model other players ought to emulate. The model, not one of the better modern players. Not a tribute to his era. The actual standard every player coming up should be trying to match. And Robertson added one more line that made the entire thing feel personal rather than analytical. I wish LeBron and I could have teamed up together. Who could have beaten us? This was the pattern. Robertson's frustration was never with the players who embodied the complete game. It was with a system he believed was failing to respect that completeness. Defense reduced to a foul line stand. Offense simplified to 2 choreographed actions. Analytics treated as a substitute for actual basketball knowledge. The players who transcended that system, who demanded the ball in every phase and delivered across every statistical category, those players had Robertson's full respect. Which is exactly why Russell Westbrook became something like a mirror image for Robertson throughout the next several years. Westbrook had been chasing Robertson's records since 2017. In the 2016-17 season, playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder without Kevin Durant, Westbrook averaged 31, 9 points, 10, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game, becoming only the second player in NBA history after Robertson himself to average a triple-double across an entire season. On April 9, 2017, Westbrook recorded his 42nd triple-double of the season, breaking Robertson's single-season record of 41. Robertson's response was not grudging. I could not be happier for him, he wrote in his own Anscape column. Congratulations to Russell Westbrook on a magnificent season. He compared their statistical lines with genuine admiration, endorsed Westbrook for the 2016-17 MVP, which Westbrook won, and then made a prediction that would take 4 more years to come true if he stays healthy. There's no reason he couldn't eventually break my career record of 181 triple-double games. He closed with a phrase that removed any doubt about where his loyalties lay. He would have been great in any era. The career record fell on May 10, 2021, when Westbrook, then playing for the Washington Wizards, recorded 28 points, 13 rebounds, and 21 assists against the Atlanta Hawks. His 182nd career triple-double passed Robertson's 181. The record that had stood since Robertson retired in 1974 belonged to someone new. But Robertson was not finished watching Westbrook. Later that summer, he appeared on the Knuckleheads podcast with Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles, and the conversation turned to the MVP race that had just concluded. Westbrook had averaged a triple-double for the 4th time in his career during the 2020-21 season. 22 points, 11.5 rebounds, nearly 12 assists per game. The media had largely treated it as a footnote. Nikola Jokic won the MVP. Westbrook received a single third-place vote. Robertson was not hiding his feelings about that. I look at Westbrook, and he got triple-doubles this year and no one even noticed it. They didn't think it was such a big deal, he said. I think that's totally unfair. I think he should have won again. If he averaged a triple-double again and he didn't win, so why keep stats then? It was, in Robertson's framework, the exact same grievance as the 2016 coaching critique, a league rewarding what looked good over what produced. Westbrook was delivering in every column of the box score, the way Robertson had his entire career, and the conversation had moved on to other things. The same podcast appearance produced Robertson's personal all-time starting five: Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, Stephen Curry, Elgin Baylor, and Jerry West. The man he had excoriated defenses for failing to contain in 2016 made Robertson's personal Mount Rushmore. That is worth sitting with for a moment. Robertson's 2016 comments were never about dismissing Curry. They were about dismissing the coaches who hadn't figured out how to stop him. LeBron James came up in that same conversation as an honorable mention, acknowledged after the starting five had been announced. Robertson addressed the complexity of it immediately. The one and only LeBron, tremendous basketball player, he said. But it's difficult in different ages and whatnot to say this guy was better than this player than that player. His all-time five was not a slight against LeBron. It was a reflection of Robertson's consistent and deeply held belief that cross-era rankings were built on assumptions that couldn't quite survive real scrutiny. Rules change, equipment changes, training changes, the way assists get recorded changes. Robertson had been pointing this out for years. What does not change, in Robertson's view, is the standard of completeness. A player who can score, rebound, facilitate, defend, and carry a team's full offensive load on the hardest nights. That player will always be great, regardless of when they play. LeBron James met that standard. Russell Westbrook met that standard, even when the voters stopped noticing. And somewhere in Robertson's career ledger, he believed he had met it too. 40 years before the analytics revolution gave everyone new vocabulary for what he had always been doing. Oscar Robertson did not walk out of that Mike and Mike interview in February 2016 as a man angry at the modern NBA. He walked out as a man angry at what the modern NBA had done with the tools it had: the passive defense, the simplified offense, the willingness to crown the spectacular over the complete. The stars who refused that bargain, who played every possession and showed up in every category, those were his people, and he said so repeatedly in his own words for more than a decade. He just made sure to criticize the coaches first.